It is the summer of 1863. Along the winding banks of the Mississippi River, thunder echoes from cannon fire that rolls for miles through the humid air. Smoke drifts lazily above the city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, a fortress city perched atop steep, commanding bluffs that overlook the river's great bend. To both north and south, Vicksburg is more than a city. It is the key to the entire war. President Abraham Lincoln understood that better than anyone. Vicksburg is the key, he said. The war can never be brought to a close until that key is in our pocket. Whoever controlled Vicksburg controlled the Mississippi, and whoever controlled the Mississippi could divide the South in two. The Confederacy's survival depended on keeping this corridor open. Supplies, from cattle and wheat to ammunition, flowed from the western states of Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas to the Confederate armies in the east. Historian James M. McPherson described Vicksburg as the linchpin of the Confederacy. It was the stronghold that bound east and west together, the artery that kept the Confederate heart beating. For the Union, the city represented both a challenge and an obsession. General Ulysses S. Grant called it the nailhead that holds the South's two halves together. Capturing it would give the Union undisputed control of the Mississippi from its headwaters to the Gulf of Mexico, severing the Confederacy and isolating its western territories. The Confederates knew the stakes. They transformed Vicksburg into a fortress city. Earthen ramparts, gun batteries, and trenches cut into the clay bluffs, all bristling with cannon. Its steep ridges and ravines made direct assault nearly impossible. Confederate Lieutenant General John C. Pemberton, a Pennsylvanian who had cast his lot with the South, commanded nearly 30,000 men to defend it. And on the opposite bank of the river, Grant's Army of the Tennessee, battle-hardened, relentless, began to close in. The Vicksburg Campaign was one of the most daring and complex operations of the Civil War. Early Union attempts to take the city had failed, blocked by swamps, floods, and fierce Confederate resistance. But Grant refused to quit. In the spring of 1863, after months of failed canal-building projects and bloody stalemates, Grant conceived a new plan, one that would test his army's endurance and his own audacity. He decided to march his men down the western bank of the Mississippi, cross south of Vicksburg, and strike from the east, cutting the city off from reinforcement. To achieve this, Grant coordinated with Admiral David D. Porter's Mississippi Squadron. On the night of April 16, 1863, Porter's ironclads ran past the Confederate batteries guarding Vicksburg. The sky lit up as shells exploded above the river, illuminating the iron warships as they steamed through the deadly gauntlet. It was one of the boldest naval runs of the war, and it worked. Grant's men crossed the river near Bruinsburg, Mississippi, and advanced inland. They struck first at Port Gibson on May 1st, then captured Jackson, the state capital, on May 14th, cutting off Vicksburg's main rail connection. Pemberton's forces scrambled to respond, but Grant moved swiftly, turning west toward the city and crushing Confederate resistance at Champion Hill and Big Black River Bridge. By May 18, 1863, Grant's army had reached the outskirts of Vicksburg. Ahead lay one of the most formidable defensive positions in the Western theater. Sat like an iron crown upon a ring of steep hills and ravines, its defenses stretching in a long arc around the city. Confederate soldiers dug deep into the clay earth, fortifying ridges with rifle pits, trenches, and redoubts. Grant believed he could storm the city quickly and ordered two assaults, one on May 19 and another on May 22. Both failed catastrophically. Union troops advanced up the ravines under withering fire from Confederate artillery. Soldiers of the 13th U.S. Infantry planted their flag on the parapet, only to be cut down within minutes. Casualties mounted by the hundreds. Private diaries tell of the horrific scenes, men pinned down under sun and smoke, unable to retreat or advance, listening to the cries of the wounded echo through the ravines. After the second failed attack, Grant grimly concluded that only a siege could take the city. And so the siege began. From May 25 to July 4, 1863, the Union Army encircled Vicksburg in an iron grip. Trenches, artillery batteries, and rifle pits crept closer each day. The Union fired more than 22,000 shells into the city, supported by naval bombardments from the river. The thunder of cannon never stopped. Grant's engineers dug over 15 miles of trenches, saps, and tunnels, mining beneath Confederate lines to plant explosive charges. One such mine detonated on June 25 beneath the 3rd Louisiana Redan, blasted a crater 40 feet wide. Union troops surged in, only to be met with desperate counterfire as the Confederates turned the crater into a death trap. Inside the city, life descended into nightmare. Cut off from the outside world, Vicksburg's residents took refuge in caves dug into the hillsides, their walls trembling with every bombardment. Newspapers of the day called it the Cave City. Food became scarce. Soldiers and civilians ate mules, dogs, and even rats. A Confederate private wrote, "We are reduced to eating mule meat. Many a strong man has lain down his arms and with tears in his eyes taken the oath on account of his family at home." The once proud city starved beneath the roar of Union guns. Yet the defenders fought on. They repelled repeated assaults, returning fire from the trenches with rifles blackened by powder and sweat. General William Tecumseh Sherman, watching the relentless struggle, later said grimly, "The devil's own day was at Vicksburg." By late June, the outcome was certain. Confederate soldiers, gaunt from hunger and disease, struggled to hold the lines. Their powder supplies dwindled. Ammunition was rationed. Grant's forces had pushed their siege lines to within yards of the Confederate works. General Pemberton faced an impossible choice. Reinforcements from General Joseph E. Johnston were not coming. The people of Vicksburg were starving. Union sappers had already blasted several mines beneath the defenses. On July 3rd, Pemberton rode out under a white flag to meet Grant between the lines, beneath an oak tree that would later become known as the Surrender Tree. The two generals conferred for over an hour. Grant initially demanded unconditional surrender, echoing his famous demand at Fort Donelson. But by the next morning, he reconsidered. He offered to parole the Confederate defenders, allowing them to return home rather than face imprisonment. Pemberton agreed. On the morning of July 4, 1863, Confederate flags were lowered over Vicksburg. Union troops marched into the city, their blue uniforms stark against the scarred earth and shattered buildings. Grant's men distributed food to the starving residents. The numbers told the story of the cost. 19,233 Union casualties, 9,091 Confederate. More than 29,000 Confederate soldiers surrendered, the largest mass capitulation of the war. As Grant later reflected, "The men I met had been long associated and engaged in one common cause. It was not a matter of interest to them to bring our common country together again and begin anew a national life." Grant, 1885. The fall of Vicksburg came just one day after the Union victory at Gettysburg. Together, these twin triumphs struck a mortal blow to the Confederacy. With Vicksburg in Union hands, the Mississippi River was now fully controlled by the North. The Confederacy was cut in two, its western states isolated from Richmond and the eastern armies. No longer could the South move men, supplies, or cattle across the river. Grant summarized it plainly in his memoirs. The fall of Vicksburg ensured the final success of the Union cause. The Mississippi River was entirely controlled by the national forces and formed a perfect line of separation in the heart of the Confederacy. The psychological impact was just as significant. Northern morale soared. After 2 years of grinding war and repeated setbacks, the victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg reinvigorated the Union cause. Historian Bruce Catton later wrote, "Vicksburg and Gettysburg together marked, in a sense, the beginning of the end for the Southern Confederacy." For the South, the twin defeats were devastating. Confederate President Jefferson Davis called it the darkest day of the Confederacy. The war would continue for nearly 2 more years, but the Confederacy would never again regain the initiative.